Well, greetings everybody, and welcome back to the Inworld review. Today is the 4th of June, 2017, and it's the first show of the month. It's also the first show for approximately 3 weeks. We've had a little bit of a break, partly intentional, partly unintentional, due to various proceedings in RL and building studios and who knows what, and even finding guests for that matter. But all is resolved today, and we've got a studio full of people to otherwise inform and entertain you. Before I do anything else, in fact, I'll introduce everybody that's here with me today. I, of course, am Mal Burns, and I'm the sort of piggy in the middle, as they say. Anyway, who have I got with me? Well, we've got handling all our cameras and joining us on the seats. I've got my as well colleague James Outloud. Welcome, James.
Oh, thank you, Mel. It's great to be back. I've been traveling for a bit, so this is fun.
Indeed. And next to James, on my left, as it were, is none other than the queen of the hypergrid. Ha ha. Thirza Ember of Hypergrid Safari and all sorts of other stuff. Welcome, Thirza.
Hey, Mel. Thank you.
And turning to my other side, on my immediate left, as I'm looking at them anyway, we have Felon Corrimal, or Kevin Phelan, from Rockcliffe University, also, of course, the principal person behind convening the Virtual World's Best Practices in Education. And he has a lot of news for us today, but is also great conversationalist when it comes to all things, really. So welcome, Felon.
Great. Thank you very much for having me back.
My pleasure. And finally, we're joined by a first-time guest with us here today. His avatar name anyway, is Edward Tarber, so I'll be calling him Edward. Hopefully I won't get confused with other names. Edward, in particular, he's part of the IMA working group in terms of worlds on the web, or virtual worlds on the web. He's also behind a web world, as it were. If I'm wrong here, he'll correct me later. Called Cyber Lounge, and our friend Selby Evans, thinker of Melville, has actually been using this for sort of office hours. I think it's every day they come through, about 6 p.m. every day, or 6 p.m. my time. And I went in there in a week, and basically it's very like a simple OpenSim. But you just dive in straight from the web, from a web link, and very impressive it is. And Edward is the one responsible for building it, basically, taking a world and getting it all up on the web. So we're going to be talking about that as well as other things as we go along. So welcome, Edward.
Thank you, Mel, and thank you for having me here.
Okay, and a big applause all round, because we haven't got a studio audience to do the claps, so I'll do it for us. Okay. Well, as I said, we have been away for a few weeks. We have been here with Metaworld News, of course, every week. We have to keep the show going there. And last week, in fact, was it was the news just after the third anniversary event of the Hypergrid Safari, which now Thirza couldn't be with us last week, but she is with us today. So I'm 10 days late, but I will now on air officially congratulate you on 3 years.
Yeah, 3 years. Wow.
Sorry, I'm getting background messages already here. I don't like this. Somebody's chatting to me in the background on Skype. Probably telling me I'm
that was your camera person.
Oh, right. Eyes forward, please.
That's right.
Fine.
That's right.
I thought I was panicking for a minute. I thought I'd been muted or something.
No.
Right. That's good. It was me panning around to the display board that messed us up, I think. Right. Yes. How does it feel? 3 years of Hypergrid Safaris. I mean, of course, there's a long history with Pathfinder's route before that and everything, but just with an average of 3 destinations every week over 3 years, I mean, we've been a lot of places, haven't we?
We've been through a lot of grids. Many of them have come and gone. Many of them are still around, and it's a great opportunity for us to celebrate their anniversaries as they come around. And it's also incredibly interesting to see how, even though 3 years seems like a very, very long time, there's lots of things we still don't know about each other and about the grids that we visit. And so it's nice to have the opportunity many times to meet the owners and actually ask basic questions sometimes, to just really discover a little bit more about the background to the grids. So we're looking forward to 5 more safari trips before I take a break for a couple of months, and then we'll be back in September, and there'll be Festavi coming up. So lots more to plan for the fall season.
Yeah,
And
it's
I have to take a break.
autumn comes around so quickly. You know, there'll be OSCC, Abbey Fest, Festavi, you know, which are different things.
That's right.
You know, all of them sort of come in the fall, as Americans call it, I guess. Now, the other thing that was quite exciting, I forget whether you've been on the shows since you started this. I know you announced you were planning it, but the arrival, it seems recursive or retrospective in a way, but Hypergrid Safari now has a embassy in Ye Olde
right.
Second Life.
Ye Olde Second Life, yes it does. Took 3 months to build over last winter. I did most of the work and trying to make it promoting particularly the free grids, the free content grids, the ones that are the most generous, rather than the people who are in it for the money. And it's promoting, also trying to reach out and promote a lot of different kinds of grids. So there's a Gorian grid advertised there, and we have Nara's Nook, which is the literary grid, and just a wide range of different kinds of ways to experience OpenSim. And I've had a really, really great response. About between 50 and 60 different grids have participated in the build of the embassy. So most of the information is fairly general, because, of course, OpenSim is constantly changing and in flux. So the minute you put up some specific information about a person, they change grids.
Yes, they're gone.
Or leave or something. So, but most of it is basically common sense and trying to give an idea of the experience of OpenSim and how it differs from Second Life. It's not necessarily better, but it's different. So it's like another country. So you need to approach it in that spirit. Because if you just think you can come to OpenSim and sort of bring Second Life with you, you will discover that you cannot, and that's going to be depressing. So much better to have a clear idea of what's happening in OpenSim, and love it or hate it, but at least you know where you stand.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned something like a Gorian sim, for example, and when I think of Second Life, I think how these days, you know, there's no real what I call Second Life community anymore. It's all a bit tribalized. It's communities within Second Life. I just say that much the same as the hypergrid. But, you know, if people in Second Life come across that, for example, only a few of them will be Gorian role players or something. But those that are may just see that exhibit and say, oh, you know, we can have a freer, you know, Gorian experience.
That's right. Yes. And
on OpenSim. And the same with Yeah, and the same with educators. They may come there and they will see ads for educational regions on OpenSim and they think, oh, there's a lot happening there, and it's cheaper than Linden's.
It's cheaper, and there's a great sense of community, I think, and it's growing. And this idea that you can be tolerant of other people's choices while you can still have your own grid doing your own thing. But that doesn't mean that you can't appreciate what other people are doing, even if it's not your choice and your lifestyle. You can still come to some sort of knowledge of what they're doing and appreciate them as people. And then you never have to go back if you don't like it, but at least you appreciate them as people. And I think that's really the great thing. Somebody we were very privileged to go over to Third Life Grid the other day and talk to Daisy Coronet and DJ Tommy Seaton, who have that grid. And Daisy said a wonderful thing. She said that the grids are like towns. So you have your hometown, but that doesn't mean you can't go and visit other towns and enjoy them and see what they have to offer and maybe do some shopping. And I think that's really a great analogy, that you've got lots of towns, but they all form a community together in OpenSim. And I think we've really managed to contribute a little part of that with not the safari trips themselves, but the wonderful people who come along, because so many people like yourself, like James, you know, you have your own grids, your own regions and your own places that you prefer, but you're up for anything and to go and visit other places and appreciate what other people are doing in their creativity. And I think that's the heart of making hypergridding worthwhile, is appreciation for others.
Oh, you know, I don't get out in the virtual world at all. Hypergrid Safari is my weekly outing.
Well, yeah, we're all busy, so that's how it works, isn't it,
yeah,
really?
I'm joking a bit there. Actually, one of the things on Third Life Grid that I thought was, of course, Sunbeam. I'm getting a bit of echo or something. Sunbeam is over there too, and things. She used to be here on Canada. Is that we saw the wonderful fairground and the safari park they built and everything else, and it looked like, you know, there's like a whole family of them to have come together, and I thought, oh well, we're a family already, we'll just get our own grid. But what I thought was interesting was say, while we were talking to them, say, what do you do most of the time? And actually they don't seem to hang out on the grid very often at all. They're traveling the hypergrid.
That's right, yeah.
So marvelous though their region was, clearly they are you know, explorers. They're not just people that hang around on their own grid admiring what they've done, which is admirable.
Yes, it really is. Yeah, because we see it in the real world. Sadly, there's so many frontiers are closing. So many people are kind of shutting themselves off from everybody who's different to themselves, which is understandable because there's a lot of fear in the atmosphere in the real world. But it's so nice to be in the virtual world. You can afford to take the chance and get to know somebody who's a little bit different to you, and they usually turn out to be really nice. So.
It's like 99% of people are really nice, actually. So, well, maybe not 99% anymore, but we do have problems in virtual worlds too. But that's just like a reflection, a microcosm of the real world. So, it's breaking back.
Yeah, but you know, if you're nice to somebody, generally they try and be nice back.
Yeah.
So we do have some great events coming up. The final party for the safari is going to be on the 5th of July. That's going to be a big party over on End of Atomic, like we did last year, the same thing. The week before we have some music, big music event over on the David Bowie and the Doors Museum over on Craft, among other things. We're going to Hogwarts the week before that.
Hey.
We have a Romance Week the week before that, which is going to be all brides and then burlesque. So something for everybody there. And then next week, of course, is a big space event because we're going to Pangea over on Hypergrid, which is a Avatar, the movie Avatar themed region, which is really lovely. And then we're going to see Ferd's Alpha Centauri, which is a Star Trek based thing. And then we go back to Kitely, where they have an international space museum. And then, so that's next. So it should be fun.
And the only place you won't visit is space. Because it's not on the hypergrid. Never mind. Sorry. Distractions there. I still have a puzzle, you know. There is a platform I'll mention later called Space. It's actually a platform. But, you know, it's sort of, when you rolls off your tongue, you know, like going to space, it sounds like you're going to a hypergrid destination or a simulator. You know. Okay. Well, I hope you'll hang on, and we'll get into lots of more interesting conversation in a while. But I'm going to,
May I just apologize if I do go offline? There is a massive thunderstorm happening here, so if I disappear, that's why. I just mentioned that up front.
just in case you go boom instead of pop. Okay, we'll bear that in mind. But if you do need to log off, just butt in and tell us.
Okay.
And hopefully we'll be okay. Okay, well, before we talk to Edward, which is very exciting and a lot of things really, we'll move on to Felon. And let's start, Felon. I know you have some news for us, but before we actually move into your news, we're talking about the hypergrid there and everything else. Is anything much happening over on Avacon, where you, of course, have your library and some other things at the moment?
Well, with the library, yeah, I mean we're continuing to add more and more resources to what's going on there. I'm hoping that later on this year we're going to be able to start working with a number of other groups in order to bring a whole pile of additional content into that particular area. But Mel Krapinski, who's our primary librarian, she's just been working her little butt off in terms of putting all kinds of materials and stuff in there. I mean, we're obviously bringing a lot of stuff that we have from Second Life over to this particular area. But one of the other things that we're trying to do with this is we're trying to not be so attached to the virtual world. We want to make sure that everything that we bring into the virtual environments, whether it's in Second Life or Avacon, eventually Unity and a few other platforms that we're hoping to get into shortly. We want to make sure that all of this is tied to databases and wikis and other assets that we have available to us, so that people have multiple channels to engage with that information, to be able to come in, to be able to do research, those particular types of things.
Right. Okay. We'll mention Unity and other things when I get around to talking with Edward here, because we're building a Metaworld studio in not only Space, which is a Unity-based platform, but hopefully in we'll get something up in Edward's Cyber Lounge too, all of which are great because people can jump in straight from the web. But moving forward a bit, before we come to all that, James is going to moan at me because my eyes have gone sideways, but it said I can click on the board display that we got up here. I actually put up 2 illustrations for you, Felon. I'm going to load the first one now, so this is probably the best starting point. This is kind of an illustration. I think you called it 10 by 10 or whatever, but this is really a bit of a kind of nice graphical outline of what you're going to be doing during the course of this year. Am I right?
It is. We've been making a couple of adjustments to it as we've been going along. This graphic's a little bit older. We still need to go back and update it a little bit. But yeah, I mean, one of the things, this is our 10th year. When we get to April next year, we will officially be 10 years old. In reality, we're closer to 12, but it's officially it's our 10th. In April of next year will be our 10th birthday as of that point. So this year being our 10th year, we're basically doing what we've been calling a Rockcliffe celebration 10 by 10. And each month we've had a little 1-2 hour celebration with a particular theme in mind. For this month, I know it said virtual tours on there. We've actually decided to move the virtual tours forward a little bit. We decided that what we would do is we would actually combine our 10 by 10 celebration with Second Life's SL14B celebration. So we've actually got 2 different events we're doing, both that sort of promote Rockcliffe and are contributing to the community as part of SL14B. The first is we've got we're extending the capabilities of what we can do with gaming inside virtual environments. So we're currently just working through putting together a game, a scavenger hunt type thing. It's a little bit more involved than just a scavenger hunt. I mean, we're really trying to go beyond those simple types of things. But we're going to have a little and my apologies, I'm stumbling because I didn't realize you were going to bring up this graphic.
Well, it's not as graphic. I was wondering what the Trough of Disillusionment was all about.
Oh, jeez.
Sorry, no, carry on.
No, that's okay. So on June 18th, just after SL14B opens, we're going to do a little discussion and talk about what Rockcliffe has done in gaming and simulation over the past 10 years, because we've got a couple of, we're not up at the level of Sony, obviously, but we have had some really interesting case studies in terms of what we've done with gaming using these particular types of virtual environments. So we're going to have a little discussion and a little review in terms of some of the different things what we've done for groups like Duke University and Loyola University and a few others. And then we're going to give a quick overview of the game that we've developed for SL14B, and then give everybody a chance to get over there and give it a shot and see if they can crack the code in terms of getting to the prize that's in the middle there type thing. The other thing that we've got as part of SL14B, we just got confirmation on this a couple of days ago though, so we haven't really announced too much about it just yet. But we're going to have a presentation on the main stage as part of SL14B, and as part of that, we're going to be talking about the future of gaming in education. And part of what we're going to be doing is we're going to be actually looking at the different exhibits that have been presented as part of SL14B and looking at the different gaming elements that people have brought into their exhibits and where they've sort of been taking things over the last few years. So we're trying to do something that's relevant to both Second Life, to the evolution of where we've sort of gotten to, and then also to to education in general. So
great. Okay, well, I noted the other thing I know you want to talk about. I'll just leave it up to you. I'm just going to flip to the next slide because in this slide it shows in October this conference you're doing. It's a real world conference. So I'm going to quickly flip through to this slide, and maybe just like to tell us a bit about that.
Yep. So there's this month we've really taken a massive step forward in terms of this month. We've been building to this for years. I was actually hoping to get into this a couple of years ago, but as you know, Rockcliffe is not supported through any government organization. We have no state funding. We have no federal funding. We have no corporate funding. Right? Everything that we've been doing has been based upon the efforts of the volunteers and everybody else that have contributed to our development and where we've sort of gotten to. So we finally managed to get everything sort of in place that we can now start to look at professional memberships within Rockcliffe. And in conjunction with that, we're doing our two different things. One is our first ever annual general conference. That's going to be held same place as Erudition, except it'll be on October 12th. It'll be the day before. And then we have our 2-day Erudition conference itself. And this is the first time that we've, as Rockcliffe, we've tried to do a real-life conference. So, and with a virtual conference, there's obviously a whole pile of issues that you don't experience with a real-life conference, and with a real-life conference, there's all kinds of logistics that are not associated with the virtual one. Even though it's still doing a conference, it's quite different. So what we're doing is we're trying to create a conference that's sort of small, that's intimate. We're trying to do something that's a little bit different from what other conferences in the education space typically do. a lot of cases you have people come in and there's this huge focus on lectures, right? And there's a focus on roundtables and some of these other things. What we really want to do is we really want to focus more on workshops. We want to try to find a blend between what we're doing with inside a virtual space, which is very much communication of knowledge. I mean, there's all kinds of things that we can do where you don't need to be physically co-located in terms of being able to interact with people, and virtual worlds especially are just marvelous for doing these particular types of things. But then one of the challenges that we're trying to address with this particular conference is how do we make the aspect of co-location, physical co-location of people, how do we make it more relevant as part of the conference or the conference attendee experience? And so that's, for us, that's one of the big challenges. So that's one of the things that we're really trying to focus on as part of this particular conference. The conference itself, however, is really sort of looking at the idea of curriculum development, how to most effectively use virtual environments, and really sort of showcasing best practices in terms of how other people are using it. We're really going to be focusing more on, while we do have a call for proposals open, we're actually going to be focusing a lot more on the practical aspects of, logistics, how to work with this technology appropriately, and hopefully doing it inside a setting that is, again, far more focused on networking and hands-on than what you would typically see as part of a regular conference. So we're sort of excited about that. We're also sort of worried at the same time because it's we're bringing in concepts that nobody has really played with before, or if they have, I mean, they've done it from a very commercialized standpoint, right? So, we're hoping that this conference will be a little bit different, just a little bit off from center, but just enough that it really provides value, like true value for people showing up. So it's not just a matter of people showing up and listening to a pile of talking heads. We actually want people to walk away from it with something extremely substantial.
Great. Now, talking of conferences, I'm going to go off a bit here. You mentioned something like moving into, you mentioned Unity in passing. Leah Lobo was with us a couple of weeks. Well, no, it must be a few weeks ago now because we had a bake. But she, at the time she came, she had just been to like a book fair that was held in Sine Space, which was a Unity-based platform. But oddly enough, the education conference she'd been attending was actually, one of these sort of participatory web conferences using Adobe Connect. And what was kind of magical about it was she got this sort of virtual build, like a simulation in space, and took people into the book fair there, and just like magic, people actually liked it. So what happened was that when they were going back to the Adobe Connect, web conference, they were doing their thing or whatever, and then they all just totally unplanned started using the Unity place in Sine Space as a kind of chill out room. So, when they weren't doing anything in Adobe Connect, they could just pop back into the virtual chill out room and sat on the seats with all the book literary exhibits around them. But they were just using it as like their, wind down thing, away from the web conference. And that just happened, it wasn't planned, it wasn't advertised as a place to go when you need a break. And people just started doing it. And they thought this was absolutely great. And of course, one of the great advantages to this was that they didn't have to open a client to do it, because all the you can open a client to get into SignWave space, but any of their spaces can simply be embedded on the web. And you can simply post a link to a web page and you're in there. You're in the world as a guest, or you can name yourself if you want to be. And, it's just like being here, except you can get there via the web. And, it provides that amazing, as Edward will be telling us in a minute, it provides that wonderful immediacy of like clicking on the link, be it in Facebook or on a web page or whatever, and just going and being in the space. A metaverse space, as it were, without actually having to go to Firestorm or Linden Labs or somewhere else to download a particular client that, locks you in. So I find that quite fascinating. If you're exhibiting, if you have a real world conference or something and you want to put a virtual world in there as part of it without actually making it a virtual world event, setting up like a kind of water cooler room virtually within the real world event could be quite fascinating. I don't know whether you've had thoughts on those lines, but you said you had some thoughts about Unity.
Well, we've had thoughts about a number of different virtual environments. I think what we're sort of settling on to a certain extent, while we haven't settled on what the next big jump is going to be for us, because here's the thing. I mean, it's technology is transient to a certain extent. I mean, we view it as being pervasive, but the reality is that if you look at any large enterprise-based application, right, and social media and these other things are sort of falling into the same type of categorizations. It seemed to be following the same trends. And this is something that I had looked at, a couple of years ago as part of a study that I was doing for one of my government clients. If you look at any large enterprise class application, there's usually about a 15-year gap between when and I apologize, I'm going to use this word, but it's really the most appropriate. There's about a 15-year gap between a particular paradigm being introduced and when that paradigm has sort of run its course. And then those companies, whether you look at Sun or Microsoft or whatever else, and then they start to change the way they're thinking about things. And so the next evolution of their product becomes radically different from what was originally introduced. And it seems as if a lot of the things that we're dealing with, Twitter, Facebook, Google, right, while they seem to have shorter cycles, it's in fact the mindset behind why it is that they're doing things the way they are seems to, anecdotally, it seems to be following the same trend. So you look at something like Second Life. We've hit 14 years of Second Life. Well, the next couple of years are going to be telling, because if we go through another 5 years of Second Life being the way it is, similar type of thing with Open Simulator, I think it's going to start to find that it's going to start to fall a little bit more by the wayside. Similar type of thing with Unity and with a lot of these other things. So when you think about technology, you have to think of it from a transient standpoint.
Well, I tend to agree, because I've got an interest in making studios and things with these things at the moment, but I'm impatient because, it's not as I'm approaching these as 10-year projects. They happen to be relevant now because, as you say, 10 years down the line, things can always change very suddenly. I actually do think some of the Microsofts and people and Facebook aren't really, they're adopting things that other people are doing rather than implementing any change themselves. I guess it's the sort of thing where they're thinking a couple of years down the line if the time is right. Whether they prove to be right or not, I don't know. When you see big corporations following trends and trying to take over, they're not always the right people to do it, to be honest.
Well, they are and they aren't, because to be quite honest, I mean, it's a bit of a crapshoot. I mean, because there's two things that you have to sort of consider. One is the technology that you're working with right at the moment, is it stable enough that it can survive that 15-year period? The second thing is, what is the transition period going to look like, and can you really make an appropriate bet, so to speak? Because that's essentially, nobody knows what the future is going to be, right?
Yeah.
If everybody knew that Google was going to be what Google is today, right, everybody would be billionaires, right, or millionaires, right, because we all would have gotten in on the stock when it IPO'd. But you just simply don't know what the future is going to bring. So companies, big and small, are making bets in terms of which technology they think is going to survive the next 12 to 15 years. What is going to be part of that next big cycle? And that's sort of the position that we're in with Rockcliffe right at the moment. We sort of, 10, 12 years ago, we tied our horse to Second Life, which proved to be a very, very good thing. We made the right bet at that particular point in time. I understand that technology is transient, so I know that over the next 5 years, there's going to be a transition period to something. I'm just not 100% positive right this second what that something is going to be. Is going to be, and it could be Unity, or it could be High Fidelity, or it could be any number of two dozen different other platforms that are starting to get into that particular space and trying to sort of position themselves to be the next generation of virtual environments.
It's so funny because we've sort of talked about this a bit in different ways over the weeks and months. You see something, what is it, the VR thing that Facebook sort of prototyped, and it made you want to laugh because it looked like, something earlier and more primitive than the Second Life when it began. And, that our context really is like the social virtual world. So, I can limit the sort of, none of us can tell the future, but I think the signs of the future are more limited when we're focusing on, social virtual worlds rather than, VR tech and all the things that are coming out of that. I mean, especially when you've got, in a way, that's what things like the new IMA are all about. They're so cross-discipline, they're looking at all these worlds and possibly different platforms, interoperability standards and stuff like that. They've widened their reach to include a whole load of things. Say we're talking about the metaverse, you can include space, high fidelity and all those things. Because they're not platform specific, but they are, if you like, almost vision specific. They're meant to be social worlds, and I don't. We don't know the future, but I do see in this current rush for VR, inverted commas, tech and everything else, that, the initial rush was technology without content. Now they're beginning to think about content, and some of them are beginning to think about social worlds. But I think, it seems to me that things like OpenSim, you can even include Second Life and stuff like that, have a decade of experience running social worlds, and however fancy the graphics, or however elementary the graphics for that matter, that these new players do, they really haven't kind of got the legacy and the understanding of what it's all about in terms of how people do project themselves, immerse themselves into social virtual worlds, where it's not just a wow visual experience. It's all about presence and engagement and communication.
I was about to say, to a certain extent, yeah. I mean, for example, one of the things that we're looking at right at the moment is not so much a major focus in terms of, we have to jump into Unity as soon as possible, or we have to jump into High Fidelity as soon as possible. Because at the end of the day, it's not necessarily about that particular platform. What it is it's about the interconnection with everything else that supports those particular platforms. And so social connections, social media, that's certainly part of it. The ability to connect with people, that's certainly part of it. But from a organizational standpoint, what do we really need to be concerned about? And from my perspective, a lot of the things that are going to drive us into whatever this next evolution of technology is going to be is making sure that we have the right assets, the right resources available to us, so that when we do make that jump big time into another platform, that if it requires that we own our own 3D objects or our own 3D models, right? Because this is where high fidelity is going, this is where Sansar is going, this is where a number of other platforms are going, is that Second Life and OpenSim was great because you could go in, you could build your own objects, you could create all kinds of different things. Now they're sort of going away from that idea. They're saying, you know something, the marketplace is where the money is, and we want to enable content creators to be able to provide content that people will just drop into their virtual worlds to create experiences.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a bit of a different mindset, which is kind of cool. And if they can bring that down to the point where it's accessible to the common person at a reasonable cost, great. But if that's the direction that everybody's headed, right? Because that's the paradigm shift. That's the difference.
That's
right? Between where we were and where we're going. That right there is the paradigm shift. And in order to take advantage of that, what that means is that I have to start developing inventories of objects and scripts and animations and everything else, so that when we're ready to jump in there, we have all the assets available to us that allows us to do that. If we don't build up those capabilities, then it doesn't matter who's got the fanciest graphics, and it doesn't matter who's got the widest social media reach, and it doesn't matter about all these other things. They're tools that support, but if you don't have the asset base to take advantage of it, then it's either going to get very expensive or it's going to. Which the change
whole
in how
idea is going to be all about buying stuff. I think that's absolutely. I mean, that's just such a great idea if you about making money, and then you could sort of talk yourself into believing and try and talk other people into believing the idea that you should have content creators that can sell stuff. I meet so many people in OpenSim, and 99.999 of them make stuff. They don't come into World to buy stuff. They come in World to make stuff and share it sometimes, and sometimes it's not perfect, but they're just not interested in buying stuff and having some parasite to skimming off the percentage when they sell their stuff.
Well, I sort of agree with you on that one, because I mean I think it's kind of silly as well. At the same time, you've got High Fidelity, you've got Sansar, you've got Kitely, which are all going that same direction, right? They're all basically going in the direction of the virtual environment is not where the money is. The marketplace is where the money is, and therefore that's where we're going to focus our development of economic value for the next generation of what's to come. So we have environments like Second Life and Open Simulator, which I feel are still extremely valuable in terms of prototyping, development, being able to create your initial concepts quickly, fast, easy, cheap. But then it becomes a question of, okay, now that I've developed something that's workable, how do I get it out? How do I repackage it, and how do I make it available such that it's either as open source or as a... Sorry, Mel, I realize I'm cutting you off. But
you are providing quite a segue into some things I want to talk to Edward about. Oddly enough, you've similar themes going to come in here. I'm just I actually would go as far as saying that by and large one of the biggest differences between OpenSim and Second Life is that Second Life is all about marketplace and consumerism, whereas OpenSim, although there are commercial grids on it and there are commercial enterprises on it, is the exact opposite. It is not, the hypergrid as a rule itself is not flavored by consumerism.
And
It-
Mal's
it
exactly
is-
right, because in fact, even if you go to a grid like Kitely, and with the Safari, we have done this many times. You come across a lot of people, and they make stuff. They're not in Second Life. You have all these so-called artists, and basically they've just bought stuff, and just they're basically window dressers. They just bought a bunch of mesh. They don't know how to make mesh and stuff. They buy a bunch of junk, and then they set it up, and it tells a story, or it's an atmospheric sim with immersive stuff going on. But the majority of people, even in places like Kitely, they make their own stuff. Yes, there's the people who like to play money and, you know, feel more important than other people because how much their little virtual balance is. But the majority are not interested in that. And that's why OpenSim, everybody in OpenSim knows that technology is old. Half the time it doesn't work. Whole regions crash, whole grids disappear, and yet still tenaciously they keep coming back and keep rebuilding. Why? Because it's the creativity that they come for, and the creativity and the community of creatives who share the same ideas and the same values and want to sort of compare and contrast themselves with each other.
Okay, I think I like Thirza. You know, I've got some, what are they called, maples in here or something, and Linden's kept in Second Life still, where accumulated somehow. But I've never really been, you know, I very rarely go out and buy anything. If I find something and it's copyable, I might get it, and actually even then never use it. There is something very different about, you know, sort of, I didn't go out and wander the hypergrid to go to places to shop. You know, I'm not a shopper. I'm a go and seer. And, you know, like somebody who spends all their days off in the real world, going out to the countryside and enjoying the countryside. Other people just go down the high street and shop. There's a fundamental different psychology there. And it's almost like OpenSim is the countryside and Second Life is the biggest shopping centre for virtual goods you've ever seen. It's they're very different, but they have commonalities, of course, that allow us to do things. For example, if you want to have an exhibition, be it educational or something else, then you possibly may choose to put that up in somewhere like Second Life because you have a huge volume of people who might even want to buy something if you've got something to sell as well. You know, and it's like a ready-made audience. But if you're doing, you know, if you're a serious artist and you've got contacts and things like that and you want to put on an exhibition, it's cheaper and it's probably just as efficient for you to put it on in OpenSim and then contact the people you want to come and say this is how to come. And although that requires a dedicated client at the moment, there may soon be other ways of doing that, as I'm going to come to in a minute. So, you know, I think one embraces things like the IMA clearly are embracing everything from commercial grids to non-profit grids and everything else. And I think some of us, probably me more like Thirza, have swing towards just activities rather than anything commercial. And I think on OpenSim, commercial activity is very, very limited because some people want to find content quick and they will go to Kitely's supermarket and buy things. You know, so, you know, even, you know, an educator who's got a bit of a budget may go to the Kitely supermarket to buy the furniture they need for, or even a building, because that is the way they can get it up and deploy it quickly if they haven't got a creative team on staff, as it were. But I think by and large, you know, that, you know, people here tend to want to do their own thing. The thing that worries me, and Kevin hinted at this, is certainly in the commercial sphere, and presumably everybody's trying to do a social virtual world or platform has some interest in making enough money to pay their wages or get the investment back, do seem to be focusing on the concept of, well, virtual land isn't really worth that much. We can easily give that away. We should be making money on the virtual, you know, on commissions and transactions for virtual goods and even currency exchanges. That's where people see the easiest way of making their money. either exchanging virtual currency for real world currency or using virtual world currency to buy things and creating a tax in that marketplace. So very, very kind of like the real world. And Sinewave with Space are also working to that model in the sense the idea is creators go and create, and then they put things into the marketplace that general users coming into the public grid will then want to buy to decorate their rooms and stuff like that. And so the marketplace, again, I think, as I more or less got Adam to say this when he was on the show the other week too, that's the bottom line, as it were, for making something like that work with their investment. But the thing that does arise here, and Kevin mentioned it a bit with Unity, is that okay, so you get creators to create and then deploy, and you make money as a grid on selling their stuff or something like that. But the thing that makes OpenSim so special, and actually really originally made Second Life so special, is that somebody who doesn't know how to build or create can learn to do it in real time with friends inside that grid. I cannot learn to do something in Unity by teleporting somebody into Unity to show me how. I've got to go do convoluted things like go on Skype and screen share and see what the hell, try and make head or tail the mess I'm making and see if somebody else can explain it to me. It's not that intuitive thing where you can just discover, and, an artist who's a good artist who has the right frame of mind can take a square prim or a circular prim or something and create amazing things with multiples of them. Simply because they're creators. They know what to do to create something special out of the materials they got available to express themselves. You can't do that. Sure, you can go into Unity, Blender, and all these other programs and do that if you want. But once you've done it, you've then got to compact it, and then you've got to figure out where am I going to put it so the public can see it, or stuff like that. It's a much more convoluted process.
But Mal, don't you think it's also true, and I think it's probably true in your case, and it's mine and many other people, that you start out just being a sort of a bystander and observer, and I would say most of the people I know who eventually became artists working in Second Life and also in OpenSim, they started out just kind of looking at what other people were doing, and then one day got the courage up to make some stuff. And then before you know where you are, they're having art shows. Some of them even have gone on to do real life art in the real world. So a lot of it is based on a complete amateur being able to use the basic tools in world and then working up from there. And if somebody says, well, no, first you've got to learn Blender before you can even start.
Yeah.
You think, all right, well, I have other ways I can pass my evenings, and it's not going to be learning Blender.
Well, I know, I agree. When I was first in Second Life, my first experience of a world like this, I guess, way back when, when I discovered I could fly, I just flew continuously for 2 months. And then I got bored. I hardly ever fly now. I do camera work instead. It's easier. But, yeah, exactly. There's a learning curve, and the learning curve isn't so much quite like learning creative software. The learning curve is learning to immerse yourself and understand what's all around you and communicate with the people. Then, you see somebody do something and think, oh, show me how to do that. Or I can do that too. Or wouldn't it be better to do it like that? And suddenly, you're right. There's nothing new under the sun. The creative spark usually comes from external influences that we change or adapt, and you're right. You just walk around in a world like OpenSim or even Second Life, to be honest, and that spark can come if you're so inclined towards sparks, so to speak. Well, this is. I want to bring in our other guest, Edward Tarber. I take it we haven't put you to sleep, Edward.
Not yet.
Not yet, indeed. Well, it's so good to have you here. Now, it's very interesting that both Thirza and Felon have raised things as they've been talking that border on things I want to mention to you. First of all, I think we need to tell people who you are, actually, more than anything else. I did a bit of this in the intro. But I'm going to just move back to my slide screen over here before we go. And this slide, I'm now putting up the next slide. It looks very simple. It probably looks to most of you like an open simulator region that has just been started. And effectively, it probably is a bit like that. This is... as you can see, there's a sign called Cyber Lounge, 3D web worlds of the browser. And that little seating area that my temporary avatar is looking at there in front of me is actually where Selby Evans, think of Melville, some of you know him as, holds his daily morning office hours. Now, the thing about this is that in most respects, this could be mistaken for a simple open simulator world or region. But in fact, this is something that you can get into and jump into immediately simply by clicking on a web link, and it will take you to a web page, and this whole world loads into your web browser. And I'm not quite sure what Selby calls this region a non-profit commons or his web world. But from your point of view, Edward, I think the whole construct's really known as Cyber Lounge, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. So Cyber Lounge is a platform which everything is based on. This is just one instance I created for Selby and his daily talk session. So it's up now for almost 3 months, and every day there are some visitors coming for a chat. Just they are curious what it's all about, and like you said before, from your other guests, really with creating this platform, I tried to solve many of the problems which are around with OpenSim, Second Life, and all the other virtual worlds.
Yeah, I should point out, and this is a major feature. There is active voice, like we're just talking in World here now to each other. When you enter this on the web, the voice kicks in immediately, so you are talking to each other. So it's not just like a pretty thing with a bit of text chat, is it? It's got the works in there. One thing that fascinated me about this is you explained to me that I could create, like the pod that this show is on in our studio here, or I could actually just go to a little offline region or online, wherever really, and I could create, a build for something I want on the web, and I could export the OAR file from OpenSim, and it could be deployed immediately into this environment. In other words, that environment can actually read an OpenSim OAR file. It's simply a different way of rendering it, but the actual information from an OpenSim OAR file can actually be brought in there, can't it?
Exactly. It's not finished yet, but it's something I'm working together with one of the IMA working groups to bring in OpenSim content into a browser-based world. So we already had some good progress with parsing the OR files, extracting all the objects and assets, and now we just try to bring everything together to have a working prototype in a couple of weeks. But still, everything you see on the screenshot or in other locations or regions in the browser-based world, everything here was created using the built-in tools. So really, literally everybody is able to create their own place, to create objects very easily, because that was one of the main goals behind all the development, to be able to do everything in-world. You can even create new animations for your avatar without any external tool.
And the Inworld building tools, I mean, I have to confess, I didn't really get to explore those. I think when I popped in, they might not have been available in Selby's region. But will they be familiar to people? In other words, will they be a bit like the prim-based tools? I mean, even Unity has prim-based tools if you want them. The people will easily understand if they want to build their own things.
I think so. It's everything is prim based, and you can set every parameter like dimensions, set a texture, use materials, set lights. Everything can be using a simple menu, which is a construction menu for building worlds and objects. And some users are already building their own stuff. I can give you a link to another region, which is a bit more complex, which is using real light and shadows, which I created to build a virtual library. So where you can also read electronic books on the fly directly in World and some other stuff.
Very nice. We were talking the other day and we ended up in so many different areas of conversation. I don't know where to start resuming them. I'd like to, you just mentioned, so I'd like to go back to it at the moment. Some weeks ago, well, it's probably a couple of months now, Steve Levine, or Steve Franklin, as we know, variations of an avatar, was on this show, and he, of course, is one of the founding fathers, I think we better call him, of the IMA, which is the Infinite Metaverse Alliance, which you mentioned just now, because I see you at their meetings, obviously. Without going into the whole mechanics of the IMA and what they're doing, I mean, Selby has thrown in his hat with them very much. A lot of other people from different places have. It's not simply a new bunch of developers trying to do something and likely to disappear. It's like a umbrella organization full of very methodically built working groups that are actually tackling different problems like load balancing working group and stress testing various different engines like Halcyon, OpenSim, Ariba, and all the rest of them. And the one that you mentioned that you're on, which of course any regular listener to this show knows I've got to be in my bonnet about this one, is literally Worlds on the Web. And since you were telling us what you're doing here, maybe you could tell us a bit like what you can about what's going on, or anybody else involved in that particular working group at the moment. As you mentioned, you're sort of doing stuff under their auspices now as well. Are there other players working on the technology to bring worlds to the web?
Yes, so far the group has 4 members already, each with coming from different disciplines, and together we try not only to build from scratch, but also to look what has Moses done so far, what's available from my platform, and also other group members already made their experiments with web-based worlds. So I think we really bring in a lot of experience so far, and just we have to make now sure that everything works together, not only with the existing things, but the things which are planned for the future regarding the IMA backend.
Sure. Did I hear somebody take a breath like they've got a question? Oh, maybe not. I thought somebody had a question there. I was about to hand it over to whoever it was, but never mind. Okay. Now, interestingly, I'd like your thoughts on this, Edward. When we got to a point of difference in the conversation with Felon and Thirza, because even though he comes from an educators and non-profit perspective, Felon was hypothesizing about the future and how everybody moves into the concept of free space but monetizing virtual goods. So it wasn't quite as simple as that, but that was the gist. Of course, Thirza, and to a certain extent me, kind of disagree, because we like to think of the empowerment of these platforms outside what you might call the commercial sector, as creative platforms and whatever. Now, IMA is not a commercial body per se. I know from the way it was founded that it wouldn't be averse to sort of working with commercial bodies on particular projects, or collaborating with them for events or something. But the IMA is very, very kind of neutral, and it's designed to be encourage working groups, yes, but be a bit non-interference, working from a distance. In other words, it's not going to send developers to the OS Grid vanilla people, the OS Grid core developers, and say, hey, do this, do that, the other. They're not taking that approach. They know damn well that developers won't want any of that. They're really just trying to look at the open source and or maybe even the commercial work being done, and sort of pull it all into one sort of visionary schematic that hopefully will make things work together. And in the future, how do you? Obviously, Cyber Lounge. I gather you built this, but you're a developer. You're not out to be making money out of virtual goods, I take it. How would you see? How would you see these things financing themselves, if I'm not getting into deep territory here? I mean, let's say you are running Cyber Lounge, you get a lot of people who want to have regions and stuff like that. To what extent is there a back-end expense on, say, servers, and in terms of people coming in and out, the weight of that, things that would ultimately, even if they're intangible, cost money? And how a recovery of that? Or do you just see it as a development challenge at the moment?
So far, it's still work in progress, and it's a public beta. But I think there is really a good chance of making money, because even if you have an open source project, it makes much sense to switch it to a so-called professional open source project, where you really charge money for professional services like availability, or just setting up things for clients. Because open source, people always think, it's open source, it's free. No, even if you use open source, which doesn't cost money for the software, it costs you money in time, resources, and everything. And this you can outsource, and you say you buy professional open source software, and the company behind this project gives you the full service.
Yeah, so as well as virtual goods, I mean, there is a huge commercial operation with service, basically. We see this in OpenSim, don't we? I mean, there are the so-called commercial grids that are trying to like baby second lives, really, who try to make a bit on the economies and renting land, and with so many prims on them. But of course, they are paying for servers. So however free and artistic we get, we're doing it on land that, is on somebody's server somewhere that they're paying for to keep online. So there's no such thing as totally free, even though I really do stick with Thirza on the point of, avoiding shopping and all that heavy commerce. But, there is always a marginal cost to keeping stuff online. I mean,
I wouldn't want you to think that I'm some sort of, I don't believe in there should be any money contribute. I mean, there are people, if you think about this, Ken Savage, he has dozens of regions which are on a computer that's an old computer that has had its day. The computer sits in his office. It doesn't really cost him anything to run it. A little bit of maintenance that he's happy to do. And he helps dozens of people have a free region. But obviously, one of these days, that computer's just going to go bye-bye, and they know it. And so if you have a free region, then you understand that it's free, and should it not work any longer, Well, that's how it works. So that's not ideal because that's not a permanent place. But there's room for every kind. That's the beauty of OpenSim, though, isn't it? That it's one platform, because you kind of get platform fatigue. Because people always propose, try this platform, try that. Oh, no, they're not. You can't go from one to another. So, oh, good God. You're saying I got to make another avatar and another platform and I start all over again from nothing? After a while, my avatar's 10 years old in Second Life. I've kind of had enough of that. Keep trying new platforms. You just, at a certain point, you say, you know what, virtual is fine, but there must be other things too. So,
well, it's also the experience.
Just platform fatigue.
Yeah, it's also the experiences. I mean, I hardly ever go into Second Life. I sometimes load Radagast just to check on messages in text form. The reason, I might not even make the Second Life birthday this year unless somebody wants me to go in and film something. I probably won't bother because I can't hypergrid over there.
Exactly. That's how I feel about it.
I log in here and I hypergrid to wherever I want to go. So somebody tells me you can't get there on the hypergrid. I tend to be not interested because there are hundreds and hundreds of different grids to
But then that's unique because we're not trying to do something. If you're trying to do something commercial or if you're running an educational project, of course I can understand that you would want that. But I do think that we're already split away from Second Life, so that's a much smaller pool of people willing to make the jump. Because if you do talk to people in Second Life, 1 in 100 is prepared to take the risk and make a jump and leave what they know. People like what they know. So you already got a much smaller pool of people in OpenSim. And then you want to propose that they go somewhere else. And you could throw money at things forever, but you can't force people to, it's hearts and minds. It's not money. And so you'll always have the people who always want to try other things. But the majority of people, at a certain point, they've tried a lot of other things, and now they just want to enjoy their evenings or the weekends online. They really do. It just becomes too much hard work.
Well, to be honest, I mean, there's a couple of people that have actually tried to go in this particular direction. I think eventually somebody will manage it. I've almost got inside the back of my head that Twitch might actually be in the best position to do this, but at a certain point, I think it has to come down to one of these things where, if you've got 5 or 6 different virtual personas, so to speak, they really like 35 or 36. Well, I'm trying to be, because I mean I've got, I've probably got about 24 Second Life accounts for various different purposes. I've got 12 personas in World of Warcraft. I've got, I mean, you get involved with gaming, you get involved with all of these different things, and eventually you start to accumulate these things. But Facebook has this policy in place that basically says they really want to discourage people from having avatars in Facebook. They want people to use their real life identities. Similar thing with LinkedIn.
That's because they want your money. That's the only reason they want to do that.
Well, they want to sell your data is what they want to do.
Exactly.
They don't want your money. They want the advertisers' money. Yeah. But I mean, the neat thing about Twitch though is that Twitch went out. Twitch bought Curse. And Curse is one of these add-on for games that allows you to sort of go through and sort of consolidate your gaming experience and be able to have a whole series of things for add-ons. But the interesting thing about it is that they could very easily extend that model such that for all of the games that they integrate, that you could have a series of avatars that are freely exchangeable between these various different games if they wanted to pursue that particular agenda. And I think
it becomes like a universe. And I think you could move your person from planet to planet.
So why bother? Because we know there's going to be new technologies, there's going to be new grids, there's going to be new games, there's going to be all.
You know why they won't do that? Can I tell you why they won't do that?
Sure.
because it's the same reason why, because they want you to rebuy everything. Because what will happen is you'll buy everything you need for your avatar, and then you'll stop buying stuff. If you can move from game to game, and you've already got all your gear and your, I don't know, your weird boots and your hat that you like and your tail or whatever it may be, once you've got all that stuff, you're going to stop buying it. And they want you to go to another game and buy everything all that, just like this, you know, rebuy everything.
Okay, but here's the counter argument to that. However, I mean, if the limiting factor to getting involved in a game is somebody sitting there going, "Oh my God, I have to set up another avatar," then why could there not be a base set of characteristics for a series of avatar profiles that you can basically go to a particular game and say, "Boom, I'm set up." Then you've actually encouraged people to go in there and then start looking at the shops to buy all this other stuff. Because the first thing, and we found this through experience with students and other people that we've brought into Second Life and other environments, the very first thing somebody wants to do as soon as they get into any particular type of virtual environment is they want to start customizing their avatar.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's so true.
I've often had discussions about, you know, like the function of the suitcase in OpenSim, for example. The idea being that when you jump on the hypergrid, it's like a quick hop on a plane. You know, you put in your suitcase what you want to take and use the suitcase to bring things back. But you don't need to take your whole bloody kitchen sink on the plane journey. And, you know, but then you get into things of like, oh, gosh, you know, have I forgotten to put what I'm wearing in my suitcase? Or will I end up naked halfway through the flight because my costumes can't move? That doesn't happen very often in OpenSim or hypergridding these days, but it certainly would if you're dealing with a lot of platforms. Now, many years ago, I know Bruce Joy at Vastpark was probably the first that was involved with this. There was an open source thing separate from Vastpark, World, that was set up, I think, and they did work hand in hand with a company called Evolver, I believe they were called. What they allowed you to do is they allowed you to go on and make a complete avatar, and the idea was this would be an open source portable avatar. Now, what it really meant, that they had as well as the avatar, they also had the idea of an independent asset server that would supply your avatar with assets that were transportable. But more to the point, what the real key here was not to think of the avatar and the clothes they're wearing and everything else. The real key here was to think about your virtual identity. Like, everybody who has an avatar is like an alt. It's like a screen persona, whether your real identity is known or not. And the idea was that at the, you know, basic things, maybe like the skin, the shape, and all the essential things about that avatar would be portable and be served from, you know, independent open source servers or something. But what that avatar chose to wear would be dependent on what they could pick up to wear on the platform they visited. So if you moved your avatar to a different platform, you wouldn't necessarily arrive dressed because all the stuff you were wearing might belong to the platform you'd left. The idea was that your persona, your virtual identity, and your basic characteristics like skin and whatever like that would be a commonality factor, regardless of virtual goods. That, you know, it's like you open your suitcase when you arrive somewhere and some stuff's missing because it isn't allowed on the grid you've come to, but you open the suitcase somewhere else and you've got a different selection because it shows you the stuff that is allowable on the grid you're on.
But then my question would be is so you go to this other thing and presumably it's a game then, because my question will be, well, what are you using virtual worlds for? Because are you just like playing some kind of quest thing, or are you just trying to socialize and hook up with somebody, or do you just enjoy creating things? Because I think what the thing with OpenSim, which sort of defines it and distinguishes it from Second Life, and this is even Kitely, even though people talk about Kitely being commercial grid, but it's exactly the same there. Most of the people they want to make things, and even showing the things they make is almost secondary. quite often really don't care about showing their stuff as much as they care about making their stuff.
And yet this is the whole crux of this is the whole crux of being virtual, however, because I mean, depending upon the space that you're going into, people often go in with very different intentions, right? So Phelan Corrimal for me is a brand, right? It is from a virtual persona standpoint, this is the brand that I have chosen to use so that when I go into a virtual space, this brand is used for education, it's used for business, it's used for professional purposes, right? I have other avatars which are used for fun and games, right? Which, you know, it's the branding of that particular avatar, the external expression the face that I want to give to the rest of the world on those particular avatars is nothing to do with being professional or that came out the wrong way, but I mean, you know what I mean, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
really
look at my.
It came out really bad.
Yeah, no, I realize that.
Look at me.
It sounded good in my head.
I was mentally drawing a veil.
Never mind. Look at my avatar for a second here, right? Now,
I'm like that.
Thirza, you will know that when I've turned up on Safari, most people will recognize me.
You. Yeah, absolutely. You know, you're like me. There's just one of you, really. Yeah. There are many avatars.
And it used to be the same in Second Life. The hairy mess there, you know, everybody recognized it. Although half the time I did turn into a pussycat, so that I wouldn't be noticed. I got tread on a lot, but you know, they couldn't find me. But this is the point, you know, it's down to purpose, right?
Yes.
I actually want to be able to. I had an old show called Crossworlds, which was interviewing people about different platforms and things. And I want to build a new studio for Crossworlds, but I want to build a copy of it on both high fidelity and space. Right?
No.
Now this.
Sorry, I'm still thinking about.
Yeah. Okay. This is quite possible, but the obstacle I face is I don't want to hop over to do a special show in space or in high fidelity and be having a completely different avatar nobody recognizes. I want this avatar, the way it looks and everything else, to be landing on that other platform. Right?
You want to brand it.
Yeah. It already is a brand, if you like. But it's also my identity. It's my virtual identity. This look and everything else. It's a bit like a younger me who looks a bit prettier than the younger me looked even. But if you can call it pretty at all, but it's me. Doesn't matter, you know. I want this virtual persona, to be the same, you know. Another reason I don't like doing a show in Second Life is I haven't got an avatar there that looks quite like this. This one's become very refined. The one in Second Life is a bit mess, although similar. You know,
ironic, really, because you would think it'd be the other way around. You would think that the Second Life one, with all that stuff available, you know, all the sort of commercial grade stuff that you can find, content. You would think that would be super perfect.
Yeah, I think it's just me. My Second Life avatar is probably more realistic and a bit more refined. The trouble is it's a mess because I tend to make a mess. Make a mess of myself. The fact that there's less available here means I'm less inclined to get messy, if you see what I mean. But anyway, that's beside the point.
All I know is somebody branded. That's all I know. That's all I've understood from this conversation. Somebody's got some brands.
Let me. We're leaving you out of this conversation a lot, but Edward, coming back to the world on the web, for example, just as you might be able to import an AOR file into Cyber Lounge or a region there, could you import? Presumably, you could import an avatar likeness that you have in, say, an OpenSim into Cyber Lounge. So when you appear in Cyber Lounge, you can be coming in a copy of your OpenSim avatar?
In principle, yes. It's not something I've prioritized yet, but the avatar model in my world is based on a Second Life skeleton together with the skin and the meshes for the clothes. So I think from a technical point of view, it shouldn't be too difficult. More complicated it will be to really be able to customize your avatar, but that's something I'm working on, and it should be available in a couple of weeks or months.
Oh, very good.
Now, I mean, we got into this issue. I know, was it when I was talking with you there, David, or not? I can't remember. You know, but I've been sort of convinced, you know, in one sense, Kevin was Felon rather was referencing the future. You know, we do seem to be moving, right? Over and beyond, say, people in OpenSim who just create here and love being here and everything else. When it comes to creators who are trying to make a little bit of pocket money out of their goods and stuff like that, or maybe they want to do a building to hold events, or it doesn't matter what they're doing, what they're creating really. There is a sense that a lot of serious creators who may have learned how to do things in Second Life or here are moving to the concept, and it's a valid concept in a way, of create once, deploy anywhere. Now, in my case, this might be going into my Outworlds installation. For Frederick's Outworlds thing is basically an open simulator that runs on your own machine. In theory, I can create anything there with God powers, and I can save and export anything from there that I've built, and hopefully export that package in those packages. So it's a building with furniture in it. I can export that package as one complete package, and it can be converted to become a package that will be in a Unity world, or maybe a package that would be FBX or object and can go into Fidelity, maybe a package that can come up here as a mesh format or something and be brought into OpenSim. So I create the whole thing away from any world. Obviously, you know, I'm not hanging out with other people while I'm doing it. That's the price I pay. But then you, instead of actually creating in the sense that you're dependent on some proprietary platform, or even if it is open source, to create, you actually create outside and then bring things in. So Kevin might want to you know, build a building which is going to be a library. Forget about the content for a minute, but like a very highly stylized building, and that's called the Rockcliffe Library. Now, if he built it in offline, as it were, even in an offline OpenSim, he will then be able to easily take ownership of it all and export it as a complete building in various formats, so that he could put the same Rockcliffe Library building on any number of platforms. He might have to convert it to an OBJ for one platform, DAE for another platform, or whatever. But, you know, the mechanics of all that are still something I'm getting to grips with. But, you know, because different platforms have different file formats. But the thing is, offline in the 3D modeling world, as it were, most of these formats are actually interchangeable to a great extent. And therefore, you can create something like an avatar, create it in your own private world, get it right, where nobody can see what a mess you're making while you do it, and then send it up to the world you want to be in. You know, now that's not as much fun as sitting in a room naked, having somebody dress you, as happened in Second Life at the beginning. But in practical terms, it seems to be a trend. I suppose part of it having to do with the rise of, you know, 3D experiences and things that aren't strictly virtual worlds. People are thinking, you know, have the content ready to put wherever you want it.
Yeah, I think we're probably about a good 10 to 15 years away from being able to see something like that, where you ubiquitously can take content from one world and bring it over to another. But what you've just mentioned is where I could see the potential for Second Life, but more specifically Open Simulator, to be potentially going over that same period of time, where you can come into this particular environment, use this as a rapid prototyping environment for the creation of those particular items, bring them out of here, which is something that we can't do easily right at the moment, and I feel it's one of the stumbling blocks. But be able to bring them out of here and then be able to send the individual assets or a small collection of assets repackaged slightly into whichever virtual world that you want.
Yeah.
Because most of them, you look at, like Sansar is talking about not bringing in whole experiences, which scenarios, scenes, whatever, but individual objects. Same thing with High Fidelity, individual objects. Same thing with Unity, individual objects. You can be able to bring them in and then, you know, set them up and place them as you need to. So, you know, if we could at least do that, if we could get over that hurdle where we could create objects in one environment and at least export them, that would be huge.
Well, what I'm trying to do now is the same thing. I mean, I want to be able to take, say, the news stage here, right, where we do the news from. I want to take that pod, and I want to take this avatar, and I want to be able to import them into High Fidelity Space and Cyber Lounge or whatever, and to the viewer, they won't know the difference. Because it'd be the same building, it'd be an instance of the same building, albeit a different platform. It'd be an instance of this avatar, albeit on a different platform. And you know, that's from a filming, broadcasting point of view. That is something I need. So it's an obvious target, you know. It's important to me. It might not be important to somebody else.
It is, but the challenge that we have right at the moment is that, and God bless the lawyers for, well, maybe not God bless the lawyers.
No, that's not that.
No, but I mean, we've gotten into this situation where here it is in both Second Life and Open Simulator. We're used to creating things as derivative works based upon things that other people have done, bringing them together, recombining them into something unique.
Yeah.
But because we are not the owners of every single object and every single tweak and every single graphic and every single script and every single animation that goes into these particular things, we can't export them. We can't take that.
Well, even if you are, though, I mean, even if you, I like to make my own animations and as much as I can in graphics, but even if you're just imitating for example, the stupid example, a Mercedes car. Suppose even if you do make all the parts yourself, if you like to fiddle around in, it's still, if it even looks like something from, you know, that's copyrighted in the real world, you're already in trouble. So even if somebody is incredibly meticulous about provenance of the actual prims and animations and so forth, you can still find yourself in trouble.
The provider, what Thirza says is very true, and it's happening a lot more. Like all those bunny rabbits that have died in Second Life, they've had to be eliminated because somebody decided they own them. Poor people. But well, it's actually quite serious. They had a hell of a lot of customers.
But then there's another thing you were saying. Well, you were saying though, because you're talking about two different things. Because your stage, what you've got there, you could probably, you know, export that into Blender and mesh that up quick as in minutes. But your avatar is a whole other thing, especially because it's not going to have the same skeleton on another platform.
Yeah, the pod for this stage, including the logo behind it and everything, is already in space. That was easy enough to export. I exported it using Singularity, I think, and then I imported it into Unity, and then Unity synced it up with my region in space. And it's just an object, you know, same shape, same size, everything else. It converted it basically from a group of prims into a mesh, and up it went. It looks rather crude because you can do much better with mesh, but that's a different matter. You know, it's the avatar, in fact, that's important. And High Fidelity is the same. Your own region in High Fidelity is on your own computer. It's in the sandbox region, so you can stick anything you like into your High Fidelity region because it's the server supplying it to the grid is your own computer. And you know, people can't. You know, people have to have the address to visit you, and if they visit you, they can't nick anything. You know, they just come to your place. Interestingly, actually, there's two things I want to get in quickly, nothing to do with what we're talking about. But Felon and Thirza here, you should stay in touch because we took the safari a few weeks ago to Avacon. We were with Marcus, in fact, and talking about video, and sort of Joyce was there and everything else. But a lot of the people on Safari are saying, "Well, can we visit this Rockcliffe Library?" And of course,
we've already been talking about that behind your back.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
okay.
we talked behind your back. Okay. Sorry about that.
So I do know that somebody wants to come and see the library one day. Okay, and okay, that's got me off.
You read our minds.
Yeah. Now, what was I talking about before I wanted to get that in?
You're talking about high fidelity and how wonderful it is.
Oh well, not quite that, but yeah, that's still very detailed. They're doing some wonderful television work from there. Actually, it seems to be believed if you watch their YouTube channel. But yeah, it's but simply I just. I've got on my hard disk these different folders. I've got one for space. I've got another one. Well, I haven't got one for high fidelity. It's in the, well, I sort of have. And I got another one for the offline OpenSim installation. So basically, as many of these places that have their duplicates or their servers on my own computer, I can do what I want, and then I can export from them. And we've talked about permissions and, copyright and stuff before. As Thirza rightly says, when you're dealing with a Mercedes, you're in danger of tripping over somebody's huge corporation's trademark anyway. But when it comes to somebody you buy a dress off or a shirt off, for example, I tend to think of it practically, and I'm afraid this isn't the way it works yet, but I think it should, just like the real world. I don't expect to buy a house and somehow take it out the ground and put it on an aeroplane with me to bring home. I expect to buy a house to go in the place where it is, if you see what I mean. But I would be almighty pissed off if I got on a plane and halfway across the Atlantic, my leather jacket disappeared. Because when you buy a good like that, you buy it as something attached to your persona. And I think, there has to be a bit of common sense in the future about what the value of some virtual goods are in terms of exportability and other values in terms of permanence.
But now, that's because money, people love to say money is a feature of virtual worlds, but that's like saying that nuclear weapons are a feature of the real world. They are a feature of the world, but they're not necessarily useful. Because the minute you take money out of the equation when it comes to goods in virtual worlds, that whole thing of, you can't take it here or you can't export it, that becomes completely irrelevant. Doesn't matter. And if everybody contributes something, then there is an exchange. There's an exchange of goods. We're all gaining benefits that we don't pay for through the hard work of people who make the viewers and the people who finance some of the different regions and grids that exist. So everybody's getting something for free. So as soon as you have money in the mix, that's when all the paranoia and you can't take this and you can't do that. That's when all that comes, because otherwise it's all just for pure fun. And
money and metadata, synonymous.
I complicate your life. I guess that people don't have enough complications in their real life.
Yeah. I mean, it's a real impediment for people. Some people coming to OpenSim, via, say, the embassy in Second Life or something. They take one look and think, "Oh God, I want to bring my inventory in. My inventory is in Second Life."
Yeah, but that's great. Then you stay in Second Life. I mean, nobody's saying people have to come. If they like money and they like to be sort of in the rat race of trying to make a living, and they like all their stuff, then they should stay in Second Life. It's a wonderful place, Second Life. Yeah. That's their place. That's where they belong. Nobody's saying that OpenSim is perfect for everybody. It's not. And that's the great thing. There's worlds for everybody. There's every opportunity. But as soon as you start having grids that are open to hypergridding, money just complicates it out of all good sense. You just have people between the paranoia and the greed and the dishonesty that money generates. It just makes it a much sadder place.
Right, now on a completely separate topic, I've thought of another question for Edward. In OpenSim, we have the hypergrid, which is really the selling point, I think, of OpenSim in a way. This interconnectivity of worlds. Obviously, Second Life has its own teleport system, but it doesn't go beyond the firewall around Linden Labs. Cyber Lounge, the worlds on the web. Would I think we were talking about this the other day? Potentially, you will be able to go from region to region from the world inside a web page.
Exactly. So it's also from the back end, it's a grid. So you have different regions, different servers, and you can switch between regions and servers without noticing. So if you teleport, you don't know if you are still on the same server or a separate one. That's all handled by the back end.
So it'd be like hypergridding around. You'll just get a kind of whoosh thing, and you'll be in a new location with some kind of.
That's right.
Yeah.
But I think the main point is it's not like a competition to the existing grids. It's more like completing the existing grids, because the main focus of having a web-based world is to make it accessible for new users. We talk a lot about creating things, buying things, but this is all something the users have to be inside the grid already.
Yeah.
Right.
But with a web-based world, you just can send out a hyperlink, a usual web-based hyperlink to somebody. He clicks the link, and you get a third dimension to your web page. So you really enter from the 2D web to the 3D web.
It's actually rather funny, because I realised that one of the most confusing points, and probably would be most confusing for newbies, right? Let's say I had an embedded Metaworld space on in Cyber Lounge, yeah, and yeah. I had it on I set up a website for it somewhere, and then let's say Thirza had a hypergrid embassy on in Cyber Lounge and put it on a web page at her place, right? Then when somebody clicked on the first link, they would end up at either mine or Thirza's place, and they would enter the world. What I find interesting is what people would do when they arrive. Let's say they arrive at Thirza's world and they want to teleport to mine. Will they choose to teleport inside the world, therefore staying on Thirza's page, or would they choose to follow a web link and open a new tab with my world on it? So I can actually see this odd thing of having lots of web tabs open with different people's places on them, rather than teleporting within the environment itself. That might confuse a few people, but I presume there'll be people would actually set on different norms for themselves.
Sounds like a great project anyway. Very good.
Now, my other question, and I've got a feeling your answer is going to be yes, Edward. Down the road, right? Let's assume we can create something in OpenSim and just literally package it up and import it into Cyber Lounge, so we've got a duplicate there. Hopefully a duplicate avatar, but we won't go for that. Maybe much longer term. And we can also teleport to the different locations in Cyber Lounge from whatever we put up there. Now, what are the likelihoods? And I think under the auspices of the IMA, this might be something that has come up, or it might be, if not in your working group, another one. Communications between worlds. How practical would it be in future? Let's say we put the hypergrid. Now, I won't choose Hypergrid Safari because people wouldn't be able to move in different worlds together, if you see what I mean. But let's say it's one of my studios, right? Okay. if people are viewing it in Cyber Lounge on the web, and other people are viewing it on video, that doesn't matter. It's a separate channel, really. But other people are sitting in the audience here. Whichever world they're in, they should be seeing more or less the same thing. But of course, these are duplicates on different platforms. They're not actually the same instance. And obviously, you couldn't instance a live OpenSim region into Cyber Lounge, at least not for the foreseeable future. But what are the possibilities for communication tools that would allow two separate instances to interact? In other words, text chat or maybe voice chat between, say, a web-based instance of a world and an OpenSim instance of the same build. Do you think that once the fundamentals of the web worlds are sorted out, do you think, obviously those communication backends will be on the internet somewhere. They wouldn't be tied to the individual platform. There'd be something that was a conduit that allowed you to keep in touch with friends, say, between both platforms. How easy do you think that sort of thing will be to implement after the basics are sort of taken care of?
I don't think it's too complicated because many things you mentioned are already present. For example, some things are even easier than you thought. To join this meeting here in Cyber Launch, you just would have to...
Okay, I'm just going to interrupt you for a minute. I've just had a back channel note from Thirza, saying that she actually has to go. So it's been great seeing you, Thirza. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And I will no doubt see you on Wednesday for the regular Hypergrid Safari at noon Pacific time meeting at HG Safari region on the Franco grid.
Make sure you wear your spacesuit.
Oh, well, it's made of leather and looks a bit like a rocket costume, but I'll pretend it's space. I won't wear the hypergrid in from space, unfortunately, if you get my meaning.
Bye, guys.
Okay, many thanks, Thirza. Very good to see you, and we'll see you soon. Okay, sorry about that, Edward.
No problem.
Just doing the formalities there, basically. And James has taken the opportunity to change seats. Right, so sorry, I was asking about the interop, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, so in principle, you could project the YouTube stream of this transmission and put it on any object inside my world. So this would be the very easy part. Also, text chat is also very easy to accomplish with an OpenSim server. A little bit more complicated, it's about voice, because so far most of nearly all web-based worlds are communicating by using WebRTC. And this is in principle a peer-to-peer connection between browsers. But there are already plugins for voice servers like FreeSwitch or so. So you just need a central speech server where you can connect from a web-based viewer as well as from a native viewer like Firestorm or any other. So I think from a technical point of view, it's easy to accomplish. It just takes some testing and maybe some fiddling with settings and parameters. But in principle, right, looking at the available technology today, it should be possible without any big problems.
Okay, and another question I particularly have is, I forget if you told me the answer to this or not, if I did even ask it before, is something that seems to be quite common these days called instancing. The idea being that you can accommodate fairly masses of numbers of avatars, but they're not all concurrent. They might be in front of the same stage, but they're not all concurrently together. In other words, you might have a stage with 6 people on it. You might have an audience, but the server can't sustain more than, say, 25 avatars. So there's immediately a second instance of the stage and what's going on in it, and a separate 25 avatars can attend an event that way. Is there anything in your architecture that allows for that kind of thing?
Yes, this was one of the features I implemented or thought about right from the beginning. So you can have instancing even for single avatars. It means if you have something for a school class, for example, and you give them some tasks to be performed in a virtual world, you can have a location for group work. So a whole group of pupils perform some specified tasks, or you can even have one instance for each pupil for solo tasks and everything in between. And the teacher could visit any of these instances or even multiple instances at the same time. So this would be the same thing with the stage. You have the stage and the performer is there on every single instance, and the audience will be separate for each instance.
Wonderful. So you could potentially set up a concert with a well-known band or something who wouldn't balk at the fact they've got a place for a mere 50 people. Now, tell me, as much as you're prepared to say, because we were obviously talking privately earlier. You are quite heavily, I'm sure Felon would appreciate that, you are quite heavily involved in education anyway, aren't you?
Yeah.
And you were telling me things about stuff that's happening in Germany, which is where you are, with is it national curriculum and certain things being brought in?
Yeah, so I'm in a cooperation with a German college, which for students studying organizational behavior. And this semester we have a prototyping project, and this group of students, 9 at the moment, will create a virtual learning environment for next year's first semesters. And the goal is to have then 400 students, 10 one in each group, 40 groups in total, to use these virtual environments for all their group working. So the people can drop in 24/7 into their individual learning room, exchange information, upload documents, download documents, prepare their tasks for presentations and everything, and do this in a pure 100% virtual environment.
And would they'd each have their own sort of micro environment, but are they able to actually sort of what we call teleport to other students' environments? Does that like you have with Cyber Lounge, or is it much more elementary?
No, it's based on Cyber Launch, and it's also you would say we will create a template for a region which each group can adapt to their own purposes. But in principle, the students can jump from each region to the other, exchange information or ideas. There will be some general regions with a meeting area, or also a special room for all the tutors to exchange additional information. So it will be a whole grid, and you can jump to any point immediately.
And let's say, I mean, the thing again, and it comes back to instancing that sounds exciting about this, is let's say you've got, you've got 50 colleges scattered in all the corners of Germany, right? And they've all got access, right? Let's say instead of one college just having a special event, like a special speaker, then particularly one college could host a special speaker, but they could also instance it out to all the other colleges.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
This is one of the built-in features. You can even stream the audio from one location all over the whole grid. So even this would work out of the box.
Well, I don't fancy listening to a class of 40 people in 20 different locations all talking at once, but I get the idea. The speaker could be heard.
The speaker, yeah. No, not everybody could talk to anybody else, but the speaker could talk to all instances.
Wonderful. A bit just like a broadcast. So, guys, no, James, you've been quite quiet. It's always nice to hear you say something. Have you got any questions? Not to Thirza, of course, but to Felon and Edward, or comments? Or have you even seen any comments on the channel, by the way?
No, not any particular comments on the channel. I mean, just have a right. Someone is agreeing at some point, but I don't know when that was.
Yes.
But I'm really taken with the idea of avatar portability, and my thoughts are: is it really technology that limits it, which I think the technology is solvable, or is it something more about somehow identifying a person as having an original creation, an original avatar, and not like copyright, but some way of legitimizing an avatar in some fashion. I don't have real clear thoughts about it, but it's something that's
Well,
been on my mind for a while.
I
Yeah,
don't think it's so much. I don't think it's so much about legitimizing an avatar, because certainly the direction that things have gone in the last 10, 12 years. 12 years ago, if you said you had an avatar in any way, shape, or form, you were sort of looked upon as being a murderer or a child molester, and now it's sort of people don't give it a second thought. I mean, so the mindset has definitely evolved, I think. And from a technology standpoint, I think if we truly wanted to do this, and I'd say the global that the technology is there that we could do it. The two limiting factors I think that we have right at the moment, certainly one is global competitiveness between the large players, between Google and Facebook and Microsoft and Sony and a lot of these other particular groups. Insofar as it's empire building, right? They want to have control. They want to be the ones that have control.
Control the world.
And to a large extent, if you control the avatar, then you control the boundaries on which that avatar is, or the person behind that avatar is spending their money.
Mm-hmm.
And it's corporations, especially public corporations that are publicly trading. Their first and foremost responsibility is to their shareholders, not to the people that are using their services. So, they have to, by virtue of the way the law is set up, they have to take into consideration profit motive opportunities all the way along in terms of how they're approaching their business. The second point, I think, has to come back to this idea of copyright, in that there are a lot of copyright lawsuits and other things that go on all the time, where people get into, or corporations get into, battles over little, and I apologize, I'm just going to say this, little stupid shit.
Yeah. I agree.
Yep.
This fight between Motorola and Nokia and Apple over the function and the design of the damn button that goes onto a cell phone. It's a button, for Pete's sake. You don't need a team of lawyers to go through and figure out who has copyright over which patents and whatever else. It's a damn flippin' button. Just acknowledge that there's 20 different independent ways of coming up with the same idea, and just get on with it. But you have this culture, this corporate culture, which has been developed over hundreds of years, where this is where we're at, where companies go at each other for any particular type of competitive advantage in order to drive more funds back to their little empire. And I think so long as that adversarial system continues to exist over elements of intellectual property, it's to my way of looking at it, we have gone to this extreme length of very nuanced arguments within court over what elements of intellectual property belong to who, and who has the right in order to monetize those particular elements, and who's got the biggest. It's a privates waving contest is essentially what it is.
Yeah,
and
oh, sorry.
No,
I was going to say it's
go
not
ahead.
just all this is true, but it's not just that. It's the copycat thing. we're getting now. Just before we were on air, I think I was mentioning to James, I mean, what the news this week is that Skype, or rather Microsoft, who own it nowadays and have made a complete chaos out of it, they have now decided that over the course of the next 2 months, starting with Android, then iOS, and then the desktop, they're completely changing Skype because they've decided that they want a competitor to Pinterest. And rather than build their own competitor to Pinterest, they're going to turn Skype into a Pinterest-like service where you're going to be exchanging pictures or doing stuff like that. And if you want to make a phone call, you'll probably have to go through 5 clicks to find the phone, and what is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. They've got one of the most successful online products, the ubiquitous voice over IP service. Why on earth would they choose to turn it into a Microsoft version of Pinterest? Why, people have good products sometimes. Why don't they just settle on improving good products they've got instead of trying to copy somebody else and turn everything into somebody else? It's like you have Facebook, maybe Google, you have Microsoft. They all seem to want to take over the world. If the other person, if another big company's got something, they either want a competitor to buy up or they want to turn something they've already got into the competitor. And, sure, electricity companies compete, water companies compete. But when why would, but now we're getting to the stage where every electricity company wants to buy up a gas company and a water company so that they can compete in the 3 areas. And all the competitors in gas and water do buy up electricity companies, etc., etc. And so you're just getting into a ridiculous space of convolution where I actually think productivity is damaged, because the more spread out and convoluted a mega corporation becomes, the less efficient it is. It's busy just running its mega corporation with so many little slots in it that it doesn't actually do a good job of its core business anymore. It's like jack of all trades, no longer master of any of them, And it seems to me a lot of bigger corporations just go down this line now. I mean, there's, like you said, Ven, there are a lot of piddling things going on, little squabbles here, there, and everywhere. And half the time, the squabbles are about things that are only a tiny fraction. They're a subsidiary of a subsidiary of a subsidiary. And it's like my opinion of Microsoft Windows. Everything they do sort of inhibits productivity instead of enhancing it. It may be a lot of bells and whistles, but if it gets in the way of productivity, you're denigrating your own initial product in the first place. So go figure. I am on my bandstand here. I better shut up. But I do see what you're getting at there. It's just there is a lot of, fiff-faffing around about fairly inconsequential things, especially when it comes to trademarks, copyrights, and who wrote that code and didn't.
Well, it's inconsequential when you consider it in the small scale, but when you consider it from the standpoint of Nokia having, 100 million phones out there, right? A couple of pennies on a cell phone adds up to a lot of money when you factor it across the scale of their overall production. Yeah. So it becomes financially worth it to have lawyers go to battle over these really stupid things rather than just leaving well enough alone. And it's not. I think who gets disadvantaged is the small players, the small people that are trying to create niche markets, that are trying to be innovative, that are trying to do these interesting things with technology and ideas that are coming to the forefront. And they basically have no resource or capability to defend themselves against a lawsuit between major corporations.
Yeah.
Right. That is then in turn applied to small players that are trying to be competitive in the marketplace. Right.
I know that damn well. I mean, a small player cannot afford to get justice almost these days, because when you're against, when your legal opponent is huge, they can keep things going on for years and decades and bankrupt you, and you'll be dead before you get anywhere. There is something inherently wrong in in civil and criminal proceedings in a way where the weight of those corporations can be, it doesn't matter whether they win or lose, they've got enough money to throw at continuing the thing so they never lose kind of attitude. And I don't think that could be very good for progress in any manner.
Yeah, but another problem is you have open standards, and open standards are created anew now and then. But the problem is that usual people don't care if they use a product based on open standards or open project software, or if it's proprietary. It just has to do their work, and that's a big problem. So people buy Windows, they are not using Linux.
Yeah, although Windows now offers you Linux inside Windows. Well,
Yes.
That's a bit of an oddity. Yeah, I mean, getting back to the virtual worlds thing on this side of things, I mean, I suppose it's sort of vaguely within the brief of a working group or working groups that might be in something like the Immersive Metaverse Alliance, IMA. We talked a lot about the absence of an underlying architecture for virtual spaces, like a 3D web, where we have projects like yours that can easily bring, or apparently easily bring worlds to the web. We have unlimited different platforms with no unifying standards. Now, I'm not saying that OpenSim and Fidelity in space and worlds on the web should be the same. Clearly, there's there's high-level developed code to make them special. But going back to the birth of the World Wide Web, we already had the internet, but it took Tim Berners-Lee and co. The ideal of taking HTTP type, the protocols to make the World Wide Web work, and they didn't hold on to it. It wasn't just open sourced. It was just given away for anybody to use. There was no stipulation about no commercial use or anything else. It just went out there. But it means that the web is what it is today, which is rapidly getting corrupted in itself, my opinion, because everybody was able to build on those standards, and those standards were there, and it meant that anybody could use their Java, their JavaScript, their all the different web technologies that have come since, to build objects and things on web pages. And there's so much variety out there now. They're not just web pages, they're whole things that have been built on the web, as indeed your cyber lounges, for that matter. But all that network of everything, as it were, the wonderful world of online stuff that we enjoy or freak out about today, was all made possible because of that protocol for the World Wide Web. And there was never anything. I know there was VRML, and there is now getting web VR and all that stuff going, but there's never been any kind of protocols that were able to be almost handed out, free of charge for anybody to build virtual worlds upon. And when you consider, let's say you've got some, I know Flash is out of favor now, but let's say you've got some glorious Flash environment running on a web page. People spend hours in it, but they actually never leave the home page they've landed on. And the scripts running underneath that, and they can all interact with servers that are actually on the internet but don't have web addresses of their own, or they have IP addresses, stuff like that. But all this stuff can go on, and any highly complex web page can still access the heart of the web, if you see what I mean, to transmit and use the protocols. Whereas with virtual worlds, we've got platforms that have no underlying really low-level structure that allows them to communicate in the way that web pages can. And I think that that's always been a sad side of deploying virtual worlds, because in theory you could have the architecture of different platforms all somehow running on something very low level that is a commonality that allows them to interoperate. Now, I don't think that's ever going to happen, is it now, Edward? Because we've almost gone too far. I mean, when we put worlds on the web, then we're going back to being interoperating with the web standards. But do you think that, do you think that it will ever come about that there's maybe a kind of low-level protocol for 3D spaces that almost rests under the platforms itself?
I think yes and no. In principle, it's already there because there are a lot of similarities between browser-based worlds and the classic virtual worlds. You have a backend, a server, and either a native viewer or a viewer in a browser. And for both solutions, there already is a protocol. The only thing is the HTTP protocol and all the web stuff is much better documented and made more public. And I think if you would publish the protocol and document everything which goes between the viewer and the server of OpenSim, Halcyon, or how to name it, Kitely, it would be similar. You could then build software against these central services in a completely new way. It's just a matter of making these interfaces public.
I must admit that you've reminded me now that on Friday's meeting at the IMA, that came up, didn't it, too? The fact that the need to go through not so much Halcyon, but a core OpenSim code, and to annotate it, so anybody who wants to do something can understand. It's got annotations in it describing what it is. Because at the moment, apparently, it's just masses of code that people have pasted in or whatever, and they've left out annotations telling you what it is and what it does. I think that was the gist of it.
This was one of the points. Of course, it's not only about documenting the source code, but also about all interfaces between components and the rest of the world.
Yeah. So if it ain't documented, we're in a deep puddle. Oh dear. Okay, well, this has been absolutely fascinating. I know that one will probably talk forever with you, Edward, about potentials there. I mean, clearly you know your stuff, and actually, I think it's really great hearing about the the real world thing in Germany too. The idea that this educational establishment can connect up this way. A nationwide thing.
I think there's a very big potential because space, or physical space, is very limited, and the virtual space you can increase in completely different numbers because right now server space is so cheap. You can host a real big region on a very small server already.
Yeah, it's it's funny how. I don't know, you tend to think of servers as servers, but prices just come down. Remember how, 2 megabytes of RAM used to cost a fortune, and now 2 gigabytes is cheap. It's just, when you think of servers and stuff. But again, there's also, I don't know how much it prevails. I know it does prevail on the hypergrid and OpenSim. People will actually take old computers that maybe aren't many good as workstations anymore, but they're perfectly good for running a server, and they will deploy them to do just that. They're probably not very robust, but I mean, they do the job.
But just let me give you an example. Selby's region, this non-profit virtual world, is running on a single core server with 512 megabytes of RAM, and it can handle about 100 avatars stretched about 5 regions.
Spread out over 5 regions.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
20 in each region. It will have not any problems, and it only has half a gigabyte of memory.
Proof of concept of something there, I think.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe I've got more than one old machine that would do the job. That is nothing, is it?
No, and this is something you can rent as a virtual cloud server for $5 a month.
Yeah. But then you fill it with prims. And it gets a bit more costly.
No, because
the
cost of prim rendering is all on the client side.
Yeah, but they still charge you more for it. But it is it's also stress on the server, isn't it? Like
No,
if you can cope with it. Really?
no.
Yeah, I mean, if you can cope with 100 avatars, it normally is
only the avatars are costly, because everything else, even physics, are done on the client. So it's really just exchanging information about interactions, character or avatar movements, and everything. All other things, animations, event handling, is all done on the client side. So it's really
But the messaging between clients goes through the server, doesn't it? To actually signal where you're moving. And
of course, this is limited to the only necessary data, and it's even adapting itself. Or so if you don't move your avatar, messages are sent in bigger time intervals as if you're moving around. So everything is done to keep load very low on the server side.
So it's like when you ping a web address, it's just instantaneous and over with. But if you're moving around, you're pinging it constantly. So it's
exactly
yes. I'm with you. God, it's fascinating. I follow all this, but if anybody ever told me how to actually do it myself, I wouldn't know where to start. But it's fascinating.
I think also a trick. Keep things simple. So my approach was to start with such some simple few features which have to work perfectly, and then to add features over time, because most companies tend to do everything at once and fail.
Yeah, they worry about the sugar coating before they bake the cake.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. They get people, UI designers in before they know what the UI is going to trigger. Yeah, very good. Okay, well, I think we're moving to the point of final thoughts. In other words, I'm not going to ask any more questions. I'm going to just ask all the guests if they've got anything else they want to say while they're here. And I think I'll start with Felon. I presume we got all the news you intended in and a bit more.
Mostly, yeah. I mean, the big things for us really is that we've decided to switch to, and we announced this a little while ago, right? But I mean, we've decided to switch to a membership model because there's a lot more that we want to do, and in order to do that, we're actually going to have to get into more technology, more staff. Actually go into a proper staffing situation. So far, we've been run on all volunteers.
Is this Rockcliffe wide kind of subscription model, or is this just an avenue you're exploring?
No. This is Rockcliffe wide, because we've gone to. I think we're starting to approach the limits in terms of what we can do as a volunteer organization. We need to take that next step, and so we're going to a membership model. At the same time, we're also still advocates of open source, open access. So right now we've got 2 membership levels. We have a social open access level, and then we've got a paid professional level, and there will be different services that will be available to each as we move forward. But a lot of our core services that we've been known for all the way along will continue to be offered as we move forward. But we really do need to start getting into a revenue model at some point if we're going to expand what it is that we're doing. So we just introduced that June 1st, so that's a huge leap for us. And for the people that have been supporting us for the last 10 years, we've sent them their letters with regards to lifetime membership in Rockcliffe, I had always made a promise to people that as we had been going through this for the last 10 years, that if we ever switched to a membership model, that I would not be asking them to be contributing to that, because they've already put so much into us being able to develop to this point.
Sure.
So, and there's no possible way I could ever pay those people back. I mean, so extending that offer to them is the least that I can do. So that's a big step. That's a huge step for us.
Yeah.
We're sort of excited about it. We're looking forward to it. I'm hoping that over the next year that we'll be getting into my goal for this. When we sit down this time next year, my goal is that we'll have about 200 to 250 professional members, and that we'll be expanding upon that as we go forward.
Is it non-profit fully, in the sense that presumably people in professional people subscribing can get tax rebates on membership and stuff like that? It's sort of set up as a non-profit, or is
It is not. It is not set up as a non-profit. The IRS. So let me just put this out there. The IRS screwed us over royally. We went to them with a plan that basically said, this is what we are going to do with non-profit motives, non-profit intentions. We are not doing anything above and beyond what any other non-profit or trade association or anybody else that has that status is doing. And they threw every single rule at the book they could at us in order to ensure that we would never get approved. So I have nothing but venom and spite for the IRS, and as far as I'm concerned. I mean, they went out of their way to ensure that we would never get approved as a nonprofit.
And this, I should ask. I'm not sure of this myself, but I presume we are talking about USA IRS. You're not based in Canada, are you, for that purpose?
No,
right?
no. We're registered out of California. Right. So I don't know what it was about that 3-year period that we were going back and forth with them. But even the timing of the letter, the final letter that we got from them. The final letter that we got from them arrived 5 days before Christmas, and we were told that if we wanted to continue to argue our point, that we had 2 weeks. 2 weeks from the date of receiving the letter, in order to file all of our paperwork. Like, there's no possible way that you could find a lawyer over Christmas and New Year's. Submit everything that to the IRS, considering half their people are probably off on vacation as well. I mean, they did everything they possibly could to ensure that we were disadvantaged all the way along. So we've just said, screw it. I mean, what we're doing is we're going down the line of a B Corp, because there's a B Corp is this halfway point between a for-profit corporation and a nonprofit organization. And it's been set up specifically for organizations that have a particular social
value.
A social goal or social objective in mind. So it basically means that what we can do is we don't have to focus the organization purely on a profit motive, which is what a normal corporation normally looks at. That what we can do is we can still focus on our nonprofit and objectives, but we do not have that 501c3 or any of those other 50 X whatevers that would allow us to officially give out tax receipts. So I mean, we do work in conjunction with other organizations that are 501c3s. We do it as a subcontractor for them, but we're not a 501c3 ourselves. So if there happens to be a project that we're doing joint work with a nonprofit, then people, we encourage people to donate to that particular nonprofit, and then any place where we can provide value or service to that particular group, then we do so through those particular means. But we still have that that open source mentality. We still have that nonprofit mentality. We're still looking at the idea of social activism in terms of a lot of things that we're doing. And that to me will never change. And that's the thing that eventually the B Corp, once we get fully, accredited on that, we have to have, unfortunately, we have to have employees before we can apply to it, which is kind of strange. And so when we went to them and said,
isn't it? Yeah.
Well, it's weird because we went to them and said everybody's a volunteer, and they said, well, we're not set up to handle that. I'm like, well, that's the way we're set up. And they said, well, come back to us when you got volunteers. I'm like, okay, all right, fine. But that's the route that we're going to go.
Wow.
And that's the route we have been going. So like I said, this is a huge. Getting into this is a huge
sea change.
It is, and I'm hoping it's going to be positive not only for us but mostly for the community, because our motto has always been one that we are here as a service organization, and that is our first, foremost, and primary mandate, to be of service to other organizations, other individuals that are interested in education and technology and virtual environments, right? And beyond anything and everything else. The other big thing obviously is in the Erudition conference, which is our first real life conference, and that's the other big thing that we've announced this month. And it's just, to us, that's huge. I mean, it's going to be a small conference. We're limiting it to about 120 people. But I'm hoping that, it's going to provide those people that come to that particular conference, it's going to provide a lot of substantial value to, and that we're really going to be able to start branching into something that's very different from what people will experience at other conferences.
Great. Okay, well, obviously, I wish you the best of luck with all that.
Thank you.
Major turning point, so hopefully it works out to benefit of all. Right, Edward, any final thoughts or things you'd like to talk about that we haven't included already?
Yeah, just some famous last words. No. No, I'm really looking forward to what the technology shifts will bring in the next few years. And I think we will still see it, that we have a real metaverse and you can go from grid to grid with the same avatar without even noticing. And I'm really happy to be a part of it. And I'm really happy to be able to work on these interesting topics together with IMA and my own developments. And I think we've not seen the end yet, and there will be major improvements.
I was just going to say, I haven't seen the end. This is just the beginning. Come on. The world starts here, or rather the metaverse does. Okay, well, that's wonderful having you, and hopefully we'll get you back at some point.
I would love to come back.
This going on. We're always up for a good chat here about progress in all areas. James, any closing thoughts from you?
No. This has been it's pretty impressive show. So I really love the news that we got today.
Well, that's good. Yes. Yes, it has. I mean, given the fact we've been away for 3 weeks, good to come back with a bang. Great conversation and everything, and covered quite a lot. While we've been chatting, I did put the final slide up, by the way. This is not Edward's world. This is actually, or that is actually the avatar of me, which of course doesn't look like the avatar of me, as I've been saying. Standing outside our building in space. If you're in Space Creators Grid, you can find that when you look up Metaworld. There ain't much there yet, but who knows? There were a few things there the other day, but they got de-resed because I'd messed up. But that's another story, right? Me and my mesh is always a mess. Hey, that's my new line. Me and my mesh, it's always a mess. Anyway. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for being here. Firstly, Thirza Ember, who of course had to vanish earlier, so we said goodbye earlier, but wonderful to see her. Thank you to Felon Corrimal, as ever, and good luck with everything, and we will see you soon, I'm sure. Thank you, Felon.
Great. Thank you very much for having me on again.
Okay, wonderful. And thank you, Edward, our Edward Tarber, our newcomer, full of exciting, useful information. It's been wonderful having you, Edward.
I have to thank you, and anytime again, if you have to want, I will come.
Many thanks.
Yeah.
I will for sure take you up on that. And thank you, of course, to James Outloud, who's also been operating all our cameras here. So at the same time as talking a bit. So thank you, James.
Oh, sure thing, Mal. I really enjoy it.
Okay. And nobody thanks me, so I'll thank myself. There you go. Right, we will return here, same time, same place next week. In the meantime, you can get news as it breaks, as it were, or of interest by following me on Twitter, twitter.com/malburns. We also have another account, twitter.com/metaworldnews. There are some others too, but I'm not mentioning them. They're mostly Machinima and Second Life and things like that. And yes, and you can still follow Hypergrid Business, by the way, twitter.com/hypergridbusiness, which is still Maria Karloff's account, though some of the articles are by David Barber. And yeah, that's to keep you going throughout the week. So it's a wrap from me, and let's see. Yes, don't know who will be here next week, but we will be back. As far as I can see, this will be we won't be taking any other extended breaks with the Inworld review, but all this you may suspect, a lot of changes underway, so you never know. We'll certainly be here with the news every week, which is the important thing. So I'm going to do I haven't done this sign out for 3 weeks now. Have I forgotten my sign out?
We will see. We will see.
Yeah, I'm going to wish you all a very good morning, a very good afternoon, a very good evening, or indeed a good tomorrow, depending on wherever and whenever you are. And we'll see you soon. Bye for now.